everybody, it's Frankie-Lou. I'm coming to you from the new Grow Together homestead here in Springbank, Alberta, where I'm going to be doing a little winter sowing today. This is basically the Milkjug method that I'm going to be doing. I have been doing this method for several years now, and it's been very, very successful. At my last homestead, I was able to fill so many garden beds over the several years with wonderful hardy seedlings due to this method. And now that I've moved to the new homestead, I'm going to be filling the gardens here, and I'm also going to be filling a bunch of garden beds up in Golden. So those are two different Zone 3 regions. This has been such a wonderful method for me. It's made it possible for me to expand my gardens every year and grow great plants with very little work. That's one of the reasons why I do love the Milkjug method so much, as it is a way of getting a lot of great seedlings without all the hassle and work of misting daily, finding shelving room inside, having your lights on timers, and hardening off. This method, you set it and forget it, and Mother Nature does the hard, heavy lifting for you. Some people thought years ago when I started doing this that this wasn't a method that could work in Zone 3, but I think that I have shown that for myself, and hopefully for those of you who follow, that this is a method that can be done successfully here. One of the reasons why we can do it successfully here, though, is because we wait. We're in mid-February right now, and this is when I start winter sowing here in Zone 3. One of the reasons for that is we have extremely erratic temperature changes through the winter here in Alberta, in the Chinook zone next to the Rocky Mountains. And whereas in some parts of the world you can start your winter sowing as soon as the winter solstice, here we want to wait until the temperatures have regulated a little bit more, and we're not going to have as many of those dramatic temperature shifts. We have regulated here finally on the prairies in Canada, and we're looking at more consistent, even temperatures now with cold days and cold nights. And that is why I'm going to start winter sowing. Milkjugs are a really great starter vessel for doing your winter sowing because they're large enough to allow for root growth and seedling growth. They're translucent, so they allow enough light in. There's a nice hole in the top that's just small enough to ensure that the humidity stays trapped in there to help with germination, but it's also large enough to allow some precipitation in. The other thing that's great about Milkjugs is it's a great way to upcycle. I'm not a huge fan of all the plastics on the planet, but if they're going to be around, this is one thing that I can do to use it an extra time before it gets recycled. So when it comes to the 3 R's of reducing, reusing, and recycling, I'm reducing because I'm not going out and buying a different container to grow things in. I am reusing it before I recycle it. So I do like to use Milkjugs for that method. There are other containers that can be used, and I also really enjoy using water cooler bottles. For this one, I don't need to transplant. These are large enough, once they're planted up, that I can actually take the domes off once the seedlings have come to full size and leave it in here, as this is a good size container to grow some plants in. I have lots of videos about that as well, but today I'm just going to show you some basics for getting started on winter sowing. So today I am going to start with some hardy perennials to Zone 3. I'm going to do some violas. Okay, or Johnny jump ups, some people call them. And they're basically almost like a perennial pansy, a small perennial pansy. They're an edible flower as well. I'm going to go hard on edible flowers this year because I'm going to try to fill a whole greenhouse just full of edible flowers. So this is one of my son's favorites. I like to use that. Sorrel is another wonderful hardy edible perennial. We grew a lot of this last year, and it will come back, but as I am filling 3 different garden beds, I could use some more because, man, you can't have enough of this in my mind. It's a wonderful green. Chives, that's another great hardy perennial. Comes back year after year. Flowers and the greens are edible. It's also very beautiful, and my bees love it too. And then we have the black swan poppies. These were wonderful last year, and I can never have enough of these because they're just so gorgeous, and they're good for Zone 3, and the seeds are edible in my baking. So I'm going to get started on that. When it comes to planting the other plants that I'm going to be doing, because I now do this as my seed starting method across the board, even tomatoes and heat-loving stuff, started in April with a cheat, but I will get to that later, and there are other videos how to do that. But for this time of the year, which would be mid to end of February up until about the middle of March in zone 3, I'm sticking with my hardy perennials. So first off, I want to make sure I have a really nice clean milk jug. It's a good idea just to collect these if you're milk drinkers throughout the years. Rinse them as soon as you're done, because there's nothing worse than trying to clean one of these if there's been dirty milk in it. But if you rinse it right away, set it out somewhere safe, you'll have some nice planters ready to go. First off, I am going to poke in my drainage holes. This is probably the most important thing to remember to do, because and I love to use a corkscrew. That's the thing that I have found easiest. Some people use a heat knife, but when it comes to the milk jug, I find the corkscrew is great. I just do a few of these a day when I'm preparing so that they're all ready to go when it's time. I like to poke about 12 nice size little holes there in the bottom of the milk jug. And then I also poke 12 more holes right at the very base on the side so that I have lots of drainage. The few times that I have had some failures with my milk jug planting, it's because I forgot to poke the drainage holes. It's really important that you place these jugs somewhere out in a snowbank or on your deck, but not in something that will not allow the water to drain off. I've seen people place them in plastic trays out on their deck or in their yard, and then what happens there is there's not enough drainage occurring. You're going to have water logging. It's not going to work. What I'm going to do next is I am going to poke a couple slits just below the handle of the milk jug, because I'm going to create a hinge here. So if I have these two holes in place, it's then easy to cut the milk jug just with a pair of scissors. Until they come together here. And as you can see, I now have a nice hinged container. Now, a lot of people ask me, how the heck can this work? Because it doesn't seem like it should work. And the reason that it does work is because it's using Mother Nature to do the two things that your seeds and your seedlings do need to actually really thrive. Number one is we're going to take advantage of this cold weather, okay? It might seem counterintuitive to be sticking seeds out in a snowbank, but a lot of seeds have a really, really hard seed coat, particularly perennials. They do tend to have hard seed coats, and they need stratification in order for there to be good germination. So by placing the seeds in the soil out in a snowbank and making sure that the soil is nice and moist, you're using cold to stratify your seeds, break the seed coat, so you're going to have good germination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put about 3 to 4 inches of nice fluffy soil in here. Now, I know sometimes when we're starting seeds inside, a lot of people will go out and buy a specific seed starter, and then they'll plant up later on into something that contains nutrition. Another reason why the milk jug method is so great is there's no need to plant up. You are just going to plant this once in here and once in the ground. That's going to save us a lot of work. Okay, that is how I can do hundreds of these a year and not lose my ever-loving mind, because I'm only planting it once here and once in the ground. With that being said, I need to make sure that I have some nutrition in my soil, because I'm going to have to sustain that seedling until it's time to put it in the ground at the end of May. Okay, so stratification can take 4 to 8 weeks. If I'm putting this in the ground now, these seeds are not going to sprout right away. They're not going to be sprouting until probably well into April. I'm going to use this time in the snowbank to stratify these seeds. I have used a nice fluffy soil. My favorite one that I like to use is Pro Mix Organic Herb and Veggie, because it's still nice and soft enough for good seedling germination, but there's enough organic nutrition in there to sustain my seedling until it's time to go into the ground. I've got my 3 to 4 inches of soil in there, lightly compacted. Okay, we don't want to press too hard. Now I'm going to plant, I'm going to get started with sorrel here first. One of the errors that a lot of people make when they start winter sowing for the first time, because they figure there's no way this is going to work. I'm going to plant so many seeds that even if only one works, I'm going to get something. That's a problem, because winter sowing will work. And if you overplant, you're going to have so many seedlings in this little jug all tangled together that you're going to lose a bunch as you're trying to separate them and transplant them. So it's a good idea to follow the seed direction packet as much as possible. Here it's telling me that I want to plant my seeds 1/2 inch deep and I want to plant them 3 inches apart. So I'm only going to put about 6 or 7 seeds in here. A lot of people will sprinkle 1/2 pack in there, and there's probably like 100 seeds in here. I do not want 50 seedlings in this jug. I want 6 or 7. That's where I'm going to have more success. So I am going to follow the packet instructions and just put 6 or 7 in there. Do that right now. There we go. And this way also, I'm not wasting seeds. One of the reasons I like to do this is because I'm a very frugal person. And if I can make these seeds go as far as possible, share them with my friends, that's a good way. If I'm putting a whole pack in here, that's wasteful. So I'm going to put just a couple handfuls of soil in here because I want to have it be 1/2 inch deep. And I'm going to pat it down. I'm not patting it down hard, but I want to make sure that all the seeds have good contact with the soil. Next is a very important part, and that is labeling up. Now, I used to use Sharpies. That's not going to work very well. Sharpie does tend to wear off. So now I use acrylic paint pens. There's also great grease markers you can get for marking cattle tags, ear tags. That stuff works great too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label this. This is sorrel. On the outside, I'm also going to label on the inside. And last of all, I'm going to do another little upcycling. This little step here is going to help take care of 2 problems that can happen. I'm going to know for sure what's in this jug, even if I have all of my labeling on the outside wear off, because I'm making some plant tags here. And when I label the plant tag and it goes in the jug, then I know for sure what's in there. And also I've saved myself a step when it comes to transplanting, because I have tags prepared for when it's time to transplant these plants. It's going to save me another little headache on down the road. I've always been a big fan of doing as much as I can to prepare in advance, and this is one thing that I do like to do. I just cut up old yogurt containers into tags. I label them. And then I place them up inside the handle here. That way, there's no plants, none of the seedlings are going to grow up into the handle here. And I also know I've got sorrel in here no matter what happens. The next step is a very important one, and that is taping this little chamber up. I like to use duct tape. I found it to be the most effective. It's really important that you don't cheap out on your duct tape. Get good quality, because the last thing you want to happen is for your jug to fall apart in your hands as you're carrying it across the yard into your snowbank. Okay, so you're going to tape that up nice. Make sure you got good adhesion so it's sticking all nicely together. And then you're going to pop this into a snowbank. Now, I get asked a lot of questions about placement. This time of the year, I'm looking for as much snow as possible because I'm just trying to insulate the jugs and make sure I'm allowing as much cold stratification as possible to happen. I've done a lot of different experiments with moving jugs to different places, and I found that the most important thing to look out for is wind. I like to place the jugs so that they're out full exposure where they can get the precipitation to come in, have some sunlight. I find morning sunlight is the best. You probably don't want it baking all day in the sun, but you know, I've also placed them out in the full sun and they've done fine. But what you might want to do is have them up against some sort of windbreak so they're not going to blow around if you do have one of our crazy prairie wind gusts come along. I also find that grouping them together works really well. I usually place a whole bunch of these jugs all together in the garden beds that they're going to go into. So I'm going to keep at this. I've got, like I said, hundreds and hundreds of these I'm going to do. I'll be putting probably about 12 out at a time. And I will keep posting as I'm putting them out to keep you guys posted as to what should be going out at different times. What's going to happen is come April, May, stuff's going to start germinating in here. And then this milk jug is going to start acting like a wonderful little mini greenhouse. It's going to protect that seedling from the worst of the elements, like hail. And that happens here a lot on the prairies. Even if we do get a cold dip in the night, I have seen seedlings survive in milk jugs where it's gone down to -10 and it's still been okay. As a good friend of mine has labeled this is a really great form of benign neglect that works, and it does get my seedlings ready to go into the ground, and I don't have to do any of that annoying hardening off. I just open them up. I allow the seedlings several days to adjust the change in humidity once I take the lid off, and then I put them in the ground. And it's been working wonderfully for me for years now. I hope you'll give it a try. I hope you will ask me a ton of questions because I love talking about this method, and I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your questions. I will continue posting, so if you are interested in seeing how some of my experiments are going to work this year with this milk jug method, please do subscribe. And as always, I hope you'll take this chance to grow together today. Have a good one.